You can't have her, the Alpha King said, his voice deadly calm. The man with the dagger laughed. She's my fiancée. My property. That's when the king's eyes flashed gold. When his claws extended. When everyone in the throne room realized they were about to witness a slaughter. He stepped in front of the bleeding woman, this stranger who'd stumbled into his court barely breathing, and growled 4 words that shattered every protocol. She's mine now, traitor. If you believe no woman should ever beg for safety, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories. We tell the stories that matter. The storm didn't care that Elara Hamilton's feet were bleeding. It didn't care that her dress, the emerald one Calvin had insisted she wear to dinner, the one with sleeves long enough to hide the fingerprint bruises, was now shredded and muddy from her desperate flight through the forest. The trees simply stood witness as she crashed through the underbrush, lungs burning, vision blurred by rain and tears. Run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Behind her, Calvin's voice cut through the thunder, velvet smooth and patient as always. Elara, sweetheart, you're being dramatic. Come back to the car. We'll talk about this like adults. Talk. He always wanted to talk. Usually with his fingers around her throat, his breath hot against her ear as he whispered exactly what would happen if she ever embarrassed him again. Not tonight. Tonight, when he'd pulled onto this abandoned mountain road, the one that led nowhere, when she'd seen that empty, predatory look in his eyes and noticed how his knuckles had gone white on the steering wheel, something inside her finally broke free. She'd thrown open the door before he could hit the locks and hurled herself into the storm. Branches clawed at her face. Her bare feet screamed in agony, cut by rocks and roots. But terror was a better fuel than pain, and Calvin's footsteps were getting closer, deliberate, unhurried. You can't survive out here alone, Elara, he called, his tone shifting from patient to poisonous. These are dangerous lands. Wolf territory. You need me to protect you. She needed him like she needed a blade through the heart. Lightning illuminated the path ahead. Massive stone walls rising from the forest like ancient sentinels. A castle. Blackstone Keep. She'd heard stories about the fortress, about the Alpha King who ruled these mountains with absolute authority, about justice that was swift and merciless. But desperate people don't weigh legends against monsters. Her foot caught on a root, and she went down hard, palms slamming into mud. Pain exploded through her ankle, sharp and immediate. When she tried to stand, her leg buckled beneath her. No. No, no, no. There you are. Calvin emerged from the rain-soaked darkness, his tailored jacket somehow still perfect, his jaw tight with that controlled rage she knew so well. In the lightning flash, he almost looked handsome. That's what had fooled her at the beginning. The charm, the gifts, the way he'd made her feel chosen. She hadn't understood the cage until the door locked behind her. You made me chase you through a storm, he said softly, rolling up his sleeves as he approached. Do you have any idea how that makes me look? After everything I've given you. Elara scrambled backward, injured ankle dragging uselessly through the mud. Stay away from me. Or what? He crouched down, reaching for her chin with fingers that had once felt gentle. Now they just felt like shackles. You'll scream? We're miles from anyone. That's why I chose this road, sweetheart. No one's coming to save you. He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back violently. Pain shot through her scalp, tears mixing with rain on her face. When we get home, he hissed, we're going to have a very long conversation about gratitude, about respect, about knowing your place. Elara drove her elbow into his ribs with every ounce of strength she had left. Calvin's grip loosened just enough. She tore free, stumbling to her feet despite the screaming pain in her ankle, and ran. The castle walls loomed closer. Torchlight flickered through the rain. Voices. People. Civilization. Safety. She crashed through the outer gates, guards shouting in alarm as a bleeding, mud-covered woman stumbled into the courtyard. The massive doors to the great hall stood open, warmth and light spilling out into the storm. Elara didn't think. She just ran. The great hall of Blackstone Keep fell silent the moment she crossed the threshold. Nobles in rich velvets turned, conversations dying mid-word. Guards reached for weapons. At the far end of the hall, atop an obsidian throne that seemed carved from shadow itself, sat a figure that made Elara's breath catch despite her terror. The Alpha King. Thalos Stormborn. His amber eyes locked onto her, ancient and burning with an intensity that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Elara's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the cold stone floor, blood from her cut spreading in dark pools around her. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please help me." The doors behind her slammed open. Calvin stood in the entrance, dagger drawn, chest heaving, his handsome face twisted with rage. "She's mine," he snarled, striding into the hall like he owned it. "My fiancée. She's unwell, unstable. I'm taking her home where she belongs." The nobles gasped. Guards moved forward, but Calvin ignored them, his eyes fixed on Elara with possessive fury. "Come here, Elara. Now." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No. I won't. Not ever again." Calvin's lip curled. He raised the dagger. "Then I'll drag you." The growl that filled the hall didn't sound human. It started as a low rumble that Elara felt in her bones before she heard it. Primal, ancient. A sound that promised violence. Thalos Stormborn rose from his throne. The movement was deliberate, controlled, but the power that radiated from him made the torches flicker. His furred cape swept behind him like wings of shadow as he descended the steps, each footfall echoing like thunder. The entire court stepped back. Calvin froze, the dagger trembling in his hand. Thalos crossed the hall in long, purposeful strides, his amber eyes blazing gold. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, unstoppable and deadly. And then he placed himself between Elara and Calvin, a wall of muscle and controlled fury. The hall went deathly silent. Thalos's voice, when it came, was quiet. "Lethal. No one harms a woman in my hall." His eyes burned into Calvin's. "Touch her again, and I'll rip your throat out myself." Calvin's face went white. His mouth opened, then closed. And then recognition dawned in his eyes. "Horror. You," Thalos breathed, and something dark and vicious twisted across his features. "Calvin Ward." The Alpha King took one step forward, and his voice dropped to a growl that made every wolf in the room bare their necks in submission. "Son of the traitor who murdered my mother." The dagger clattered from Calvin's fingers. Guards surged forward, seizing him by the arms. Calvin struggled, shouting protests, threats, lies, but Elara couldn't hear them anymore. Because strong arms were lifting her from the cold floor. The scent of pine and winter and something wild she couldn't name surrounded her. Thalos Stormborn's voice rumbled near her ear, rough as gravel but impossibly gentle. "You're safe now. I've got you." Elara's vision swam. Darkness crept in at the edges. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness claimed her was amber eyes filled with ancient fury and unexpected tenderness. And for the first time in 2 years she stopped running. If you can't stand men like Calvin who hide cruelty behind charm, hit subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories and comment what time you're watching this. Only manipulators and abusers won't subscribe. Don't be like Calvin. Elara woke to softness. For a moment, a single disorienting heartbeat, she forgot where she was. Forgot the storm, the blood, the terror. Her body registered warmth first, then the scent of herbs and clean linen, then the absence of pain. No, not absence. The pain was there, her ankle throbbed, her cut stung, her muscles ached, but it was muted, distant, as though someone had placed a barrier between her and the agony. Her eyes flew open. The ceiling above her was vaulted stone, crossed with dark wooden beams. Candles flickered in iron sconces along walls lined with shelves of glass bottles and dried plants. A healing wing. She was in a healing wing. Blackstone Keep. The Alpha King. Calvin. Memory crashed over her like a wave. She sat up too quickly, gasping, and immediately regretted it as her vision swam. "Easy." A woman's voice, calm and professional. "You're safe here. Lie back." A healer appeared at her bedside, middle-aged, with kind eyes and steady hands. She reached for Elara's wrist to check her pulse. Elara jerked away, pressing herself against the headboard. Don't touch me." Old habits. Old fears. Even gentle hands felt like threats now. The healer's expression softened with understanding. She withdrew her hand slowly, giving Elara space. "No one will touch you without permission. You have my word." Elara's breathing came in short, shallow bursts. Her fingers found the collar of the thin sleeping gown someone had dressed her in, pulling it higher to cover the bruises she knew were there. Fingerprints around her throat. Marks on her shoulders. Evidence of ownership she'd learned to hide. Where is he? Her voice cracked. Calvin. Where? In the dungeons. A deep voice answered from the doorway. Elara's heart stopped. Thalos Stormborn stood in the entrance, backlit by torchlight from the corridor. He was even more imposing than she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence filling the room without even trying. Those amber eyes found hers, and something in her chest pulled tight. She flinched despite herself. Thalos noticed. Something flickered across his face, pain perhaps or understanding. He moved slowly, deliberately, into the room and then did something that stunned her. He knelt. The Alpha King lowered himself to one knee beside her bed, bringing his eyes level with hers. A position of equals. A position of respect. My name is Thalos, he said quietly. And I swear to you, Elara Hamilton, you are safe within these walls. No one will harm you here. Especially not me. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. She searched his face for the lie, for the trap, for the moment the mask would slip. But all she saw was steady certainty. How do you know my name? She whispered. You said it. Last night, before you collapsed. His mouth quirked slightly. You also told me if I was another controlling bastard, you'd find a way to haunt me from the afterlife. Heat flooded her cheeks. I said that. You were delirious with pain and fear. I took no offense. His expression sobered. May the healer examine you? Your injuries need proper tending. Elara hesitated, then nodded slowly. The healer approached with careful movements, her touch professional and gentle. As she unwrapped the makeshift bandage on Elara's ankle, something strange happened. The air seemed to shimmer. Faint silvery lines flickered beneath Elara's skin, like veins of moonlight running just under the surface. They appeared for only a heartbeat before fading, but everyone in the room saw them. The healer gasped softly. Blessed moon. Thalos went utterly still. His nostrils flared, and his eyes flashed gold, pure molten gold, before he forced them back to amber. Elara watched his hands curl into fists where they rested on his knee, knuckles going white with tension. What is it? Elara asked, fear creeping back into her voice. What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong, Thalos said, his voice rougher than before. You're. He seemed to be struggling with something internal, his jaw clenched tight. You carry lunar blood. Ancient bloodline. Rare. I don't understand. The doors burst open. Guards dragged Calvin into the healing wing in chains. His face was bruised, his expensive clothes torn and dirty, but his eyes still held that entitled fury Elara knew too well. This is absurd, he snarled. I demand to speak before the court. This woman is a thief and a liar. Elara's entire body locked up. The room tilted. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't. Thalos moved. One moment he was kneeling beside her bed. The next, he was standing between her and Calvin, his massive frame blocking her completely from view. And something happened that Elara didn't understand. The temperature in the room spiked. Thalos's scent, pine and winter storm and wild places, suddenly flooded the space, so thick and overwhelming it felt tangible. It wrapped around Elara like a blanket, like armor, like a shield declaring to every wolf in the vicinity mine. Protected. Untouchable. The guard stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock. The healer's hand flew to her mouth. Calvin's face went pale with recognition and rage. You didn't. You couldn't have. Silence, Thalos growled, and the word carried such command that Calvin's mouth snapped shut involuntarily. But the damage was done. Whispers erupted in the corridor outside. Footsteps thundered as news spread through the keep like wildfire. The Alpha King has claimed her. A human woman. Without consent. Without ceremony. Without permission. Elara's hands shook. She didn't understand what had happened, but she understood power. Understood men who took what they wanted without asking. No, she breathed, panic rising in her chest. No, please don't be like him. Don't. Thalos turned immediately, his expression stricken. Elara, I won't belong to anyone. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I just escaped one cage, I won't. You don't belong to me. Thalos's voice cracked with urgency. He took a step back, giving her space, his hands raised peacefully. You belong to yourself. Always. What just happened? He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration and guilt warring across his face. My wolf acted on instinct. To protect you. Not to own you. Never to own you. Liar. Calvin spat from behind him. You've claimed her before the entire kingdom. She's yours now by law. Then I reject the law. Thalos's voice rang out clear and absolute. He turned back to Elara, and in front of the guards, the healer and Calvin, in front of witnesses who would carry his words to every corner of the realm, he placed his right hand over his heart. I, Thalos Stormborn, Alpha King of Blackstone, swear this oath. Elara Hamilton is under my protection, not my possession. No man will hurt her while I draw breath. Not him. He jerked his head toward Calvin without looking away from her. Not the council. Not anyone. And if she chooses to leave these walls tomorrow, I will escort her safely to wherever she wishes to go. Her choice. Her freedom. Her life. The sincerity in his words, the raw honesty in his eyes, cracked something open in Elara's chest. Before she could respond, running footsteps echoed in the corridor. A messenger burst through the doors, breathless and pale. He dropped to one knee before Thalos. My king, the High Council has arrived. They demand immediate audience. The messenger swallowed hard. They accuse you of unlawful claiming and they're demanding the woman be surrendered for investigation. The room went deathly silent. Thalos's eyes flashed gold again, and this time, he didn't suppress it. Tell the council, he said, his voice dropping to a lethal quiet, that they can demand all they want. But no one is taking her anywhere. If you believe no one should be surrendered to people who see them as property, subscribe and comment Freedom Matters below. Don't let the council win. The grand hall had been transformed into a court of judgment. 6 figures sat in high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle before the throne, the High Council leaders of the 6 major wolf clans that held power across the territories. Each radiated authority that came from centuries of bloodlines and political maneuvering. Elara stood in the center of the hall, flanked by guards who'd been ordered to keep her secure. She felt their eyes on her like brands, assessing, calculating, reducing her to a problem that needed solving. Thalos stood to her right, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, but not so close as to crowd her. His jaw was locked tight, amber eyes tracking every movement the council made. The eldest of them, a silver-haired woman with eyes like chips of ice, leaned forward. Elder Vara, Thalos had called her, head of the northern clans. State your full name, Vara commanded, her voice sharp as a blade. Elara Hamilton, she answered, hating how small her voice sounded in the cavernous hall. Hamilton. Another elder, a broad-shouldered man with ritual scars across his face, spoke up. That name appears nowhere in the registered clan lineages. You claim to be human. I don't claim anything. I am human. Are you? Vara's eyes narrowed. Remove your sleeve. Elara's breath caught. What? Your left sleeve. Remove it. Panic clawed at her throat. The bruises. They wanted to see the bruises, to examine her like livestock. No. I don't. It's not a request, girl. Thalos's growl rumbled low. She's not on trial here. Calvin Ward is the one who belongs in chains, not her. The king's attachment to this woman is precisely why we're here, Vara said coldly. An unexplained claim on an unknown human raises questions of security, of judgment, of fitness to rule. The words hit Thalos like physical blows, but he didn't flinch. Elder Vara stood, descending from her seat with predatory grace. She approached Elara, and despite every instinct screaming to run, Elara forced herself to stay still. Who were your parents? Vara asked, her tone slightly softer now, almost curious. My mother died when I was 16. I never knew my father. Your mother's name? Elara Hamilton. She was a nurse. We moved a lot. Elara's hands trembled. Why does any of this matter? Because, Vara said, reaching out slowly, you carry something that shouldn't exist anymore. Before Elara could pull away, Vara's fingers brushed against her wrist. The touch was brief, clinical, but the reaction was immediate. The silvery veins blazed to life beneath Elara's skin, brighter than before, spreading up her arm like lightning caught under glass. The air shimmered. Temperature dropped. Every candle in the hall flickered in unison. Vara stepped back, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock. "Blessed ancestors," she breathed. "She's moon-touched." The council erupted in whispers. "Impossible. The bloodline died out. Hasn't been a moon-touched in 3 generations." Elara stared at her arm in horror as the glow faded. "What's happening to me?" Vara turned to address the council, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This woman carries dormant lunar blood. One of the oldest, rarest bloodlines in our history. Moon-touched wolves don't just shift, they can manipulate lunar magic itself. Bend moonlight. Control tides. Influence other shifters during the full moon." "That's insane," Elara whispered. I can't do any of that." "Not yet," another elder interjected, standing. "But dormant power can awaken. Violently. Uncontrollably. She's a walking catastrophe waiting to happen." The Los moved closer to Elara. "She's also a person who came here seeking sanctuary. Not a weapon to be locked away." "Sanctuary." Vara's laugh was bitter. "You've claimed her, the Los. Whether you meant to or not, your scent marks her as yours. That makes her a political liability. If rival clans discover a moon-touched is bonded to the throne." "I'm not bonded to anyone." Elara's voice cracked. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to escape." "Escape what?" Vara's eyes sharpened. "Tell us. Why were you running?" The question was a trap. Elara knew it. But the weight of 6 ancient pairs of eyes, the pressure of the hall, the exhaustion of carrying secrets for so long, it all crashed over her at once. "From him," she choked out. "From Calvin Ward. He hurt me. For months. He controlled every part of my life, and when I finally tried to leave her voice broke. He said I belonged to him. That I'd never escape. That he'd kill me before he let me go." Tears streamed down her face. She hated them, hated showing weakness, but she couldn't stop them. "He was going to kill me on that road. I know he was." Silence fell over the council. Some faces showed sympathy. Others remained cold, unmoved. Vara's expression was unreadable. "Calvin Ward," she said slowly, "is the son of Marcus Ward, the traitor who nearly destroyed the Stormborn line 20 years ago." "I know," the Los said darkly. "Then you should also know," Vara continued, "that the Ward family has been searching for moon-touched bloodlines for decades. Marcus believed controlling one would give him power to challenge the throne." Her eyes locked on Elara. "Did Calvin know what you were?" Elara's blood ran cold. I don't know. How could he?" "Your mother moved frequently, you said. Changed locations often." Vara's voice grew harder. "That's what moon-touched families did when they went into hiding. To protect their children from being weaponized." The pieces clicked together like a nightmare puzzle. The way Calvin had isolated her. The strange questions he'd asked about her mother. The genealogy documents he'd been obsessed with finding. The way he'd become more possessive after she'd cut her hand and the blood had seemed to shimmer in moonlight. "He knew," Elara whispered in horror. "He knew, and he was waiting. For me to awaken." "A moon-touched awakening is triggered by extreme trauma or life-threatening danger," another elder explained clinically. "He was likely trying to force your transformation. To control you once it happened." Bile rose in Elara's throat. "Which is why," Vara announced, addressing the full council now, "she must be taken to the Lunar Keep immediately. For her safety and ours. She needs to be studied, trained, contained until we understand the extent of her power." "Contained?" Thalos's voice dropped to a lethal growl. "You mean imprisoned?" "We mean protected," Vara countered. "From herself and from those who would use her. The Lunar Keep has protocols." "No." The Los stepped fully between Elara and the council, his massive frame a wall of defiance. "She stays here. Under my protection. You don't have the authority to refuse the council." "I have the authority of my bloodline." His voice boomed through the hall, and his eyes blazed pure gold. His wolf was rising, barely leashed. "My mother died protecting the innocent from the Ward's treachery. I invoke her memory, her sacrifice, and I declare sanctuary for Elara Hamilton under the Stormborn name." The hall went deathly silent. Vara's face hardened. You would defy the council? For a girl you met yesterday. I would defy the gods themselves, Thalos said quietly, dangerously, before I hand an abused woman over to people who see her as an object to be contained. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Then the doors exploded inward. A scout stumbled into the hall, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, breathing in ragged gasps. My king, he gasped. Calvin Ward has escaped the dungeons. He had help from the inside. The scout swayed, catching himself against a pillar. He's rallied soldiers. Mercenaries. Rogues loyal to his father's house. They're mobilizing at the forest border. Thalos went utterly still. How many? At least 50. Maybe more. The scout's eyes found Elara. He sent a message. He says he's coming for what belongs to him. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elder Vara's voice cut through the stunned silence, cold and final. Then the council's decision is made. The girl is clearly the target of an armed assault. She's too dangerous to remain here. Guards, take her to the Lunar Keep. Immediately. No. Elara's scream echoed off stone as guards moved toward her. And the Thalos Stormborn's wolf finally broke free. If you stand with victims and against monsters like Calvin, hit subscribe and comment. Sanctuary for survivors. Only abusers stay silent. The transformation didn't complete. Thalos's eyes blazed molten gold, his canines lengthening, claws beginning to emerge. But he stopped himself with visible effort, muscles trembling with restraint. When he spoke, his voice was barely human, layered with the growl of his wolf. No one touches her. The guards froze, hands hovering over their weapons but not drawing them. No one was foolish enough to challenge an alpha on the edge of losing control. Elder Vara's expression remained ice-cold. Stand down, Thalos. You're proving our point. You're compromised. The council is dismissed. Thalos's words were final, absolute. Until Calvin Ward is dealt with, Elara Hamilton remains under my protection in Blackstone Keep. Anyone who disagrees can challenge me for the throne. The silence that followed was deafening. One by one, the elders rose and departed, their faces dark with disapproval. Elder Vara was the last to leave, pausing at the doorway. This isn't over, young king. The council will return. And next time we won't be asking. When the doors closed behind them, Thalos's shoulders sagged slightly. The gold faded from his eyes, leaving only amber exhaustion. Elara stood frozen in the center of the hall, her whole body shaking. You just made enemies of the most powerful people in the kingdom. For me. Why? Thalos turned to face her, and the raw honesty in his expression stole her breath. Because it was the right thing to do. The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of preparation. Thalos had the castle locked down. Gates reinforced, archers positioned on the walls, patrols doubled. The storm clouds gathering on the horizon seemed to mirror the tension crackling through Blackstone Keep. And in a quiet corner of the training courtyard, as the first fat raindrops began to fall, Thalos stood across from Elara with a practice blade in his hand. Your ankle can't handle much, he said gently, but your hands can. I'm going to teach you how to defend yourself if someone gets close. Elara stared at the wooden knife he offered her. I don't know if I can. You can. His voice was certain. You already fought back once. In the forest. You survived. She took the blade with trembling fingers. For the next hour, Thalos moved through basic defensive techniques. How to break a grip, where to strike to cause maximum pain, how to use an attacker's momentum against them. His hands were patient, his instructions clear, and every time she flinched or hesitated, he gave her space. You're doing well, he said after she successfully broke his hold for the third time. Something warm unfurled in Elara's chest at the praise. She met his eyes and found him watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with combat training. The air between them shifted. Thalos stepped back quickly, clearing his throat. That's enough for today. You should rest. But as she turned to leave, the healer from earlier, the kind woman who'd tended her wounds, approached with hesitant steps. My lady, there's something you should know. About your mother. Elara's heart clenched. What about her? I recognized the name. Elara Hamilton. The healer's voice dropped to a whisper. 30 years ago, A young moon-touched woman escaped the lunar keep. She disappeared into the human world, changed her identity, and was never found. Her name was Sarah Moonwhisper. The world tilted. My mother fled the keep? To protect you, the healer said softly. She knew what they'd do if they discovered she'd given birth to a moon-touched daughter. They would have taken you, raised you as a weapon, controlled every aspect of your life. The healer's eyes glistened. She chose freedom for you over safety for herself. Elara's throat closed. Her mother had spent years running, hiding, protecting her from the very fate the council now wanted to impose. And she died never telling Elara the truth. A raven's cry shattered the moment. A massive black bird swooped into the courtyard, landing on the stone wall. Tied to its leg was a rolled piece of parchment. Thalos retrieved it, his expression darkening as he read. What is it? Elara asked, though she already knew. Calvin. Thalos's jaw clenched. He handed her the note. The words were written in elegant script that made her stomach turn. Elara, sweetheart, you can't hide behind stone walls forever. You belong to me, body, blood, and power. I'm coming for what's mine. And when I take you back, I'll make sure you never run again. See you soon. See. The paper slipped from Elara's fingers. Thalos was already moving, shouting orders. Lock down the outer gates. Archers to the walls. I want every entrance secured now. Thunder rumbled overhead as the storm broke in earnest. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the courtyard to mud. Soldiers scrambled to positions. The castle came alive with organized chaos, the machinery of war grinding into motion. Elara stood in the rain, paralyzed. This was her fault. All of it. Calvin was coming because of her. People would die because she'd run here instead of just accepting her fate. Stop. Thalos's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. He stood before her, rain plastering his dark hair to his face. I can see what you're thinking. This is not your fault. He's coming here because of me. He's coming here because he's a monster who can't accept that you're not his property. Thalos's hands curled into fists. And he's coming here because his father's legacy is built on treachery and bloodshed. Your mother, Elara whispered, remembering what Elder Vara had said. Calvin's father killed her? Pain flickered across Thalos's face. 20 years ago, Marcus Ward was my father's most trusted advisor. He used that trust to orchestrate an ambush during a peace summit. My mother threw herself in front of the blade meant for my father. She died in his arms. Elara's heart broke for him. I'm so sorry. I was 8 years old, Thalos continued, his voice rough. I watched her bleed out on those stones. I watched my father break from grief. And I swore I would never let anyone suffer like that again if I had the power to stop it. His amber eyes burned into hers. Protecting you isn't just duty, Elara. It's redemption. It's making sure her sacrifice meant something. Tears mixed with rain on Elara's cheeks. I don't want anyone else to die because of me. Then we make sure they don't. Thalos's voice was steel and conviction. We stand together. We fight together. And we show Calvin Ward that his father's evil dies with this generation. The moment stretched between them, electric and fragile. Then the war horn sounded. Deep, mournful blasts that echoed across the mountains, the ancient call to arms. A soldier appeared at the top of the wall, shouting down through the rain. My king! The enemy is at our borders. At least 60 strong with siege equipment. Thalos's expression hardened into something ancient and deadly. Calvin Ward has made his choice. He looked at Elara one last time, and something fierce and protective blazed in his eyes. Stay in the inner keep, no matter what you hear. Promise me. Thalos. Promise me, Elara. She nodded, throat too tight to speak. Thalos turned and strode toward the walls, his voice booming across the courtyard. Soldiers of Blackstone, tonight we defend not just our home, but our honor. No mercy for traitors. And as lightning split the sky, Elara saw the army emerging from the forest. Calvin Ward stood at their head, his smile visible even through the rain. He'd come for her, and he'd brought hell with him. The first wave hit the walls like a tsunami of steel and fury. Rogues scaled the rain-slicked stones with inhuman speed, claws digging into mortar, eyes glowing with bloodlust. Arrows rained down from Blackstone's archers, but for every attacker that fell, 2 more took their place. Calvin's voice rang out across the battlefield, amplified by some supernatural means, smooth and confident. "Thalos Stormborn. Send out the girl and I'll call off my forces. Keep her, and I'll burn your castle to ash with everyone inside." From the tower window where guards had stationed her for safety, Elara watched in horror as the battle unfolded. Thalos stood at the center of the courtyard, and as she watched, he began to shift. The transformation was terrible and beautiful. His body expanded, bones restructuring with audible cracks, dark fur rippling across his skin like shadow made solid. Within seconds, a massive obsidian wolf stood where the man had been, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with eyes like molten gold and fangs that gleamed like ivory blades. He was magnificent, and he was fighting for her. Thalos's wolf tore through the attackers with brutal efficiency, protecting the gates, rallying his soldiers with howls that shook the stones. But there were too many. Even an Alpha King couldn't be everywhere at once. Elara watched a rogue slip past the front lines, watched him drive a blade toward Thalos's exposed flank. The Alpha twisted at the last second but not fast enough. The blade opened a gash across his shoulder, dark blood staining his fur. He stumbled. "No," Elara breathed, pressing her hands against the cold glass. Calvin appeared in the courtyard then, striding through the chaos like he owned it, a cruel smile on his handsome face. He held a crossbow loaded with a bolt that gleamed silver. Wolfsbane, Elara realized with horror. A killing shot. Last chance, Stormborn. Calvin aimed the crossbow at Thalos's heart. "The girl. Now. Or you die protecting something that was never yours." Thalos snarled, preparing to lunge despite his injury. And something inside Elara snapped. Not her mind. Not her fear. Her power. The pain started in her chest. A burning pressure like her ribs were too small to contain what was building inside her. She gasped, doubling over, and her skin began to glow. The silvery veins blazed to life, brighter than ever before, spreading across her entire body like lightning racing through her bloodstream. The air around her shimmered and warped. "My lady!" The guard at her door rushed forward. "What's happening?" Elara screamed. It wasn't pain exactly. It was too much. Too much energy, too much light, too much power trying to force its way out of a body that had never known what it truly was. The moon, barely visible through storm clouds, suddenly broke through. Full and massive and impossibly bright. And Elara's transformation began. But she didn't shift into a wolf. Her body lifted off the ground, levitating as moonlight poured from her skin in waves. Her hair floated weightless around her face, each strand seeming to glow from within. Her eyes opened and they were pure silver. No iris, no pupil, just radiant lunar light. The power detonated outward. A shockwave of pure moon magic exploded from the tower, rippling across the entire castle. It hit like a physical force. Enemy soldiers were thrown backward, weapons clattering from their hands. Even Thalos's own forces stumbled, shielding their eyes from the blinding light. Calvin's crossbow was ripped from his grip, the bolt firing uselessly into the sky. In the courtyard below, every head turned upward, toward the tower, toward the woman descending through the air like a goddess made of moonlight and fury. Elara didn't walk. She floated down from the tower window, her bare feet never touching the ground, her simple dress rippling in an impossible wind that existed only around her. Silver light traced patterns across her skin, ancient symbols that flickered and shifted like living things. She landed in the courtyard, and where her feet touched stone, frost spread in delicate crystalline patterns. The entire battlefield went silent. Calvin stared at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Elara," he whispered. "What have you?" "My name," she said, and her voice carried an otherworldly resonance, layered with power that made the words feel carved into reality itself, "is not yours to speak." Thalos shifted back to human form, standing at her side despite his injury. Blood ran down his shoulder, but his expression was one of fierce pride and something deeper, awe, perhaps, or recognition of what she'd become. They stood together, Alpha King and Moon-touched, protector and survivor. "You wanted me?" Elara's hands rose and moonlight coalesced between her palms, forming chains of pure silver light. "Then come claim me. If you dare." Calvin lunged, drawing a knife, his face twisted with rage and desperation. Elara's hands swept forward. The chains of moonlight shot out like living serpents, wrapping around Calvin's wrists, his ankles, his throat. They yanked him to his knees with brutal force, the silver light burning where it touched his skin. He screamed. "You said I belonged to you," Elara said, walking toward him slowly, her feet still hovering inches above the ground. Each word was measured, powerful. "You said you owned me. That I was your property." The chains tightened. "But you were wrong." She stopped directly in front of him, looking down at the man who'd terrorized her for so long. "I belong to myself. I always have." Calvin tried to speak, but the chain around his throat constricted just enough to silence him. Thalos moved forward, placing himself beside Elara. His hand found hers, warm, solid, grounding her in reality even as power sang through her veins. "It's over, Ward," Thalos said, his voice rough but final. "Your father's legacy ends tonight. You've lost." Around them, Calvin's forces were surrendering, throwing down weapons, backing away from the supernatural display before them. Elara felt the power building to critical levels. It was too much, burning through her like wildfire, and she didn't know how to stop it, didn't know how to. "Elara." Thalos's voice cut through the chaos in her mind. "Let go. I've got you." She turned to look at him, and the concern in his amber eyes was the last thing she saw. The power released all at once. Another shockwave, gentler this time, washed across the courtyard, and Elara's eyes rolled back. Her body collapsed, the moonlight extinguishing like a blown candle. Thalos caught her before she hit the stones, cradling her against his chest as the glow faded from her skin, leaving her looking small and fragile and utterly human. "Healers," he roared. "Now." Around them, guards moved to secure Calvin and the remaining attackers. But Thalos didn't see any of it. He only saw the woman in his arms, the one who'd walked into his hall broken and bleeding, and walked out glowing with the power of the moon itself, the one who just saved them all, and collapsed from the weight of her own strength. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Elara, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, silver fading back to brown. "Did we win?" she breathed. "Yes," he said, his throat tight. "You won." She smiled, small, exhausted, triumphant. Then darkness claimed her completely. If you believe survivors can become warriors, subscribe and comment Moon-Touched Power. Elara's story isn't over yet, and neither is yours. Elara woke to the scent of cedar and winter storms. For the second time since arriving at Blackstone Keep, she found herself in an unfamiliar bed. But this time, the room was different. Larger. More personal. Books lined the shelves, weapons hung on the walls, and a massive fireplace crackled with warmth. This wasn't the healing wing. This was someone's private chamber. "You're awake." Elara turned her head to find Thalos sitting in a chair beside the bed, his elbows on his knees, his face etched with exhaustion and relief. His shoulder was bandaged, but he was alive. Whole. "How long?" Her voice came out hoarse. 2 days. He reached for a glass of water on the bedside table, offering it to her with gentle hands. "You burned through more power than your body has ever channeled. The healer said it's a miracle you survived." She drank gratefully, memories flooding back. The battle. The transformation. The way moonlight had poured from her skin like she was made of starfire. "Calvin," she whispered. "In the dungeons. Under constant guard this time." Thalos's jaw tightened. "He'll face formal judgment within the week." Elara set down the glass, her hands trembling slightly. "And the council?" As if summoned by the words, raised voices echoed from somewhere beyond the chamber door. Thalos stood, his expression darkening. "They arrived this morning. They want you transferred to the Lunar Keep immediately." "No." The word came out stronger than Elara expected. "I won't go." Something fierce and protective blazed in Thalos's eyes. "Then they'll have to go through me first." The confrontation happened in the throne room an hour later. Elder Vara stood at the head of the council delegation, her expression carved from ice. "The display 2 nights ago proves exactly what we feared. She's untrained, dangerous, and bonded to the throne. She must be contained. She saved this kingdom." Thalos interrupted, his voice ringing with authority. "While you debated protocols and politics, Elara Hamilton stood against an army and won. An uncontrolled awakening that could have destroyed the castle. But didn't. Thalos descended from his throne, and every eye in the room tracked him. Because she has more control in 2 days than most shifters develop in years. Elara stood beside him, still weak but refusing to show it. She dressed in clothes borrowed from the castle, simple but sturdy, nothing like the restrictive dresses Calvin had chosen for her. She met Eldervara's gaze without flinching. "I'm not going to the Lunar Keep," Elara said clearly. "I choose to stay here. To train here. To learn what I am on my own terms. You don't have the authority to refuse the council. She has the authority of sanctuary." Thalos's voice dropped to something ancient and unbreakable. "I invoke the blood oath of the Stormborn line. Elara Hamilton is under my protection, bound by blood and honor. Any who move against her move against me." The room went deathly silent. A blood oath was unbreakable, sacred, older than the council itself. Eldervara's face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect perhaps. Or resignation. "The council will remember this, Thalos Stormborn." "Good," he said quietly. "Remember that some things are worth fighting for." Calvin Ward was brought before the court in chains 3 days later. He looked nothing like the charming, polished man Elara had once known. His expensive clothes were torn and filthy, his face haggard, his eyes wild with desperation. When he saw Elara standing beside the throne, whole, free, glowing with quiet strength, something broke in his expression. "This isn't over," he spat. "You think you've won? You're nothing without me. Nothing." Elara descended the steps slowly, and Calvin actually flinched as she approached. She stopped just beyond his reach, looking down at the man who'd once made her feel so small. "You're right about one thing," she said softly. "This isn't over. Because every woman you hurt, every person you manipulated, every life you tried to control, they're all going to hear about what happened here. They're going to hear that the man who claimed to own me is now on his knees in chains." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. "And they're going to know that monsters can be defeated." Thalos's voice rang out across the hall. "Calvin Ward, for crimes of assault, attempted murder, conspiracy, and treason, you are hereby stripped of your noble title and lands. You will remain in prison pending formal sentencing by the High Council." Guards dragged Calvin away, his screams echoing through the corridors. Elara watched him go and felt nothing but relief. The days that followed were filled with discovery. Elara trained with healers who understood lunar magic, learning to channel the power without burning herself out. She discovered her abilities were tied to emotion, to healing old wounds, to processing trauma, to transforming pain into strength. Each session left her stronger, more whole. And through it all, Thalos was there, patient, supportive, giving her space when she needed it and steady presence when she didn't. One evening, as the full moon rose over the mountains, Elara found him on the ramparts overlooking the valley. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, joining him at the stone wall. "Thinking," he said, his eyes on the moon, "about how different everything is now. Regret it? Never." He turned to face her fully, and the moonlight caught in his amber eyes. "Elara, I need to tell you something. That first night when you stumbled into my hall, I felt it immediately. The pull. The bond. My wolf recognized you before I understood why." Her breath caught. "The claim. It wasn't calculated or political. It was instinct." His hand found hers on the cold stone. "My wolf knew you were meant to be protected, to be cherished, to be..." He hesitated. "To be mine. If you choose it." Elara's heart thundered in her chest. A month ago, the word mine would have sent her running. But Thalos had shown her what it meant when someone said it with respect instead of ownership. "I spent 2 years afraid," she said quietly. "Afraid of being trapped, controlled, diminished. But with you..." She met his eyes. "With you I feel safe. Truly safe. For the first time in so long." "You are safe," Thalos promised, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "And you are free. Always. Even from me if that's what you choose." Instead of answering with words, Elara stepped closer and rested her forehead against his chest. His arms came around her carefully, protectively, and she felt the tension she'd carried for years finally begin to ease. "I choose this," she whispered. "I choose you. I choose us." Above them the moon shone bright and full, bathing them in silver light. The story spread across the kingdom like wildfire. They spoke of the woman who stumbled into the Alpha King's court covered in bruises and blood, of how he rose from his throne to shield her, of how she awakened into something ancient and powerful and stopped an army with moonlight. They spoke of justice, of protection, of a king who valued honor over politics. And in villages and cities across the realm, women trapped in silence heard the tale and felt something stir inside them. Hope. Months later, Elara stood on the balcony of Blackstone Keep beside Thalos, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. She wore training leathers now, comfortable and practical. Her hair was bound back simply, and around her wrist glowed a faint band of silver light, the mark of her power, controlled and claimed. "Ready?" Thalos asked, gesturing to the courtyard below where her next training session waited. Elara smiled, genuine, bright, unafraid. "I'm ready for anything." Because the girl who ran through the dark had found her light, and she was never running again. If you believe everyone deserves a second chance at life, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories and comment New Dawn. Share this story with someone who needs to know monsters can be defeated and survivors can become legends.